in my humble opinion, and you guys know how humble I always am, in my humble position, defund the police died last night officially in the New York City mayoral race because Eric Adams, who is a 22-year veteran of the New York Police Department in the Democratic primary, he is going to win, barring all sorts of craziness. And let me explain exactly how this works. They have ranked choice voting going on in New York City, so there are a lot of different directions that this can still go. But in an interesting angle, it's almost unheard of for someone to end up winning who was up by as much as Eric Adams is up. Maya Wiley is who he ended up beating. This is a Democratic civil war over defund the police. Maya Wiley didn't just want to defund the police, even though she had her own private security guards. She also wanted to potentially take away police's guns, what they would protect themselves with. She didn't explain. Eric Adams came out and said, look, we need aggressive policing. We need to allow people to come back and actually be able to take care of their communities. And this is not just a New York City issue, by the way. This is crime surges in cities across the country versus last year. Atlanta, murders are up 58%. New York City, murders are up 13% off of a big number last year. Portland, Oregon, murders are up 533% over last year in Portland, Oregon. Chicago up 5%, LA up 22%, and Philadelphia up 37%. All of these increases are off of substantial increases that had happened in 2020 as well. We've got murder rates skyrocketing. Why is that? Because we've defunded police, at least arguably, because we have taken away their ability to police. And so, what is interesting about this is they polled New York City residents, fairly liberal city, New York City, and they said, hey, what's your top concern in this mayoral primary for Democrats? 50% of people said their primary concern was crime or violence. Just 20% said racial injustice. This is Democrats now. So Democrats have already moved rapidly from being most concerned about racial injustice to now crime and violence wildly overtaking racial injustice inside of the Democratic Party. And there's a civil war going on here. And I think Eric Adams' win over Maya Wiley effectively ends the Democratic Civil War. There's also some pretty fascinating aspects here. Andrew Yang flamed out in this presidential election. Eric Adams has 14,000 Twitter followers. Andrew Yang has 1.9 million Twitter followers. Yet Eric Adams crushed Andrew Yang in the Democratic primary of New York City for the mayoral spot last night. Twitter isn't real life. There is this obsession with the idea that whatever happens online is a reflection of the real world. If it were, then Andrew Yang having 1.9 million Twitter followers compared to 14,000 for Eric Adams, that would have translated in some way. We saw this before, by the way. Joe Biden was the least active on social media of any, really, of the Democratic candidates, yet he ended up winning the Democratic nomination. And I do think this is instructive, all right? I said defund the police died in New York City in the mayor's race. I want to read. You know, I'm old school. I bring out a lot of times columns here. And Joe Biden came out today to talk about defund the police and actually talk about going after gun control. He's trying to address the skyrocketing rates of crime and violence in this country. And Thomas Friedman, who I think is a really smart columnist, he wrote a column called "Want to Get Trump Reelected? Dismantle the Police." And his column, look, I like Thomas Friedman. I think he's a really smart guy. I've read several of his books. But he tried to focus on Trump in this column. But ultimately, what he can't ignore is that homicide rates in large cities, most of them being run by Democrats, are up 30% on average last year. They were up. And this year, they're up another 24% in the beginning of the year. And he's pointing out that the issue is that Democrats could really get sunk here. And he talks about Minneapolis in particular, where all of this defund the police, Black Lives Matter argument started surrounding George Floyd in the 2020 version of that. He quotes a woman named Sandra Samuels who wants not to defund the police, but she wants to refund the police and give them more money, not less, making sure that they continue to protect her community while doing so in a safe way. And she talked about in this column what I think should be an oftentimes top story. She said a 9-year-old girl named Trinity Otteson Smith was killed by a stray bullet while jumping on a trampoline in Minneapolis, where the crime rate is skyrocketing. This 9-year-old girl that most of you haven't heard of. And this woman, Sandra Samuels, who runs what's called the North Side Achievement Zone, said, for the last year, I and my neighbors have watched black mothers react with incredulity when their child is killed in community violence and not by a white cop. Their tragedies do not trigger citywide protest rallies. People don't say their child's name, and there are no citywide demands that this has to stop. She's talking about all the kids that are dying in cities because police are not being allowed to do their jobs. Now look, defund police has a tangible and real and significant cost. And the cost is not being borne by the rich, private security guarded political figures who are arguing in favor of defund the police. Guys, girls, black, white, brown, Asian, Hispanic, everybody out there believes that defunding the police is a bad idea, except for a small cadre of blue checkmark brigade members who are extremely active on social media. In fact, what they have done in arguing to defund the police is they have led to thousands of additional deaths that are likely to have been prevented if police were able to do their job. And this is what Thomas Friedman is writing about. Now, he has to do his typical Donald Trump is awful before he actually gets to his point here in this column. But the headline is, want to get Trump reelected, dismantle the police. Defund the police is the dumbest political argument of the 21st century. There is no basis in reality for it. We already knew exactly what was going to happen. As soon as you pull police out of being allowed to police in neighborhoods, cities, states, do you know what happens? The criminal element moves in and the crime rate skyrockets. This is not uncertain. We saw this with the Ferguson effect. When you delegitimize police, murders, mostly of minorities, skyrocket. Safety plummets in inner city neighborhoods. We need more police, not less. Credit to Missouri Senator Josh Hawley, who came out today and said, we need 100,000 new cops. Do you know who he sounds like when he says that? Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton won election in 1992, combating the massive crime wave that was then overtaking much of the country by putting more police officers on the streets. Instead of demonizing police, we need to be lauding them, praising them, encouraging them, and hiring more of them.